Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Application Packaging Experts Roundtable. Some quick housekeeping. Everyone is muted, but we do have, and would like to get your questions in the chat. There is a Q&A tab in one of the windows here on the On24 platform. So throughout the session, or if you want to wait till the end, we'd love to hear your thoughts and take your questions. And we will send a video for the event. Hopefully you noticed when you signed up this time, there's actually an option for you to check that you'd like to automatically be subscribed to future roundtable events. We've been doing them every other month. We intend to continue doing so. So it makes it a little easier for you to stay in the loop if you are interested. My name is Bob Kelly. I am the Director of Product Management for Flexera's products around software vulnerability management and Admin Studio packaging tools. I've got Karen again with me this time. Karen, quick intro.
Hello, everyone. Sure. Thanks for joining us today. I'm the product manager for Admin Studio, and I work under Bob. Mike?
Yep. Sure.
Mike?
Mike O'Connor, Senior Solutions Engineer, just crossed into 17 years at Flexera and supporting Admin Studio for almost 14 of those. So thanks for being here.
Wow. It's a lot of years.
Yeah.
He knows his Admin Studio.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then we've got Sonny on.
I don't have as much experience as Mike, but my name is Sonny. I am one of the account managers for Admin Studio. Glad to be here.
And Mike's a tough one to follow. We're going to have to change the order of that for you next time.
All good.
All right. So, we try to bring a topic to the roundtable as our key subject. But as always, if you have a question on any other topic, anything is game. So quality is the topic we brought around this time. I think this was kind of triggered by the whole log4j thing. That was a problem, is a problem, will be a problem for some time. And it's another one of those things where, it comes up and then we look at our solutions and say, how do our solutions help customers with this? And then how could we maybe do even better? And when it came to Admin Studio, we saw, we have a lot of quality tests in the product. We examine the product and look at the packages and the package contents to tell you ahead of even deployment what kind of problems you might have. And that's what we'll talk a lot about today from, with Admin Studio as kind of a lens, but topically, it's relevant to anybody, no matter what solution you might use, these things that affect quality. But for log4j in particular, because we're looking at package contents, we were able to quickly release a feature in just a week or two's time so that when you scan your applications, we can tell you if we see log4j in there. And so if you have a catalog of 100 applications that you're managing, it'd be really great to say, okay, these dozen or so have log4j, and I can, investigate those more closely and make sure we get them updated, whatever you might need to do. So that's how we kind of landed on quality as a topic. It's a little in general. We did talk about testing before, and that's obviously very closely related. But we've also talked before about package testing and analysis and fixing of problems before deployment as a good way to ensure high quality deployments and more successful deployments. And we since kind of backed off on that a little bit because in many cases you're talking about Windows compatibility, and Windows compatibility just isn't the challenge it used to be. So in many cases it isn't a good use of time to analyze, identify, and correct problems, even if we make it very easy to do so, just because it's so infrequent that you'd run into a showstopper. But reactively, it's very valuable. And that same set of functionality is what enabled us to do some content awareness. Java is another key one, and we'll talk about that, where wouldn't it be great when a new Java security update comes out and you have to deploy an update to know which packages will be affected by it, which packages need to be updated because of that, et cetera. So there's the quality of the package, the quality of the deployment, the command lines, making sure everything's right. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to decide when to fix it. ICE errors are a perfect example of errors that often don't need to be addressed at all. We've got some good examples to run through. And I think before we do, I just wanted to, let Kieran, if you want to go next, we'll just kind of go around the table real quick and set this conversation up. Kieran?
Sure. I generally have this question now. Let's say you have a package. You've done your bit of adding the customization or whatever standards or requirements that you have to add on that package, and then you have deployed it to the endpoints via one of the distribution systems. It could be Configuration Manager or Intune. And the distribution system reports that the installation was successful. So you're all good now. Technically, you're all good because your package was created successfully and the deployment was successful and all of that, and you think everything was all good. So does that ensure that you're done with that package? Does that ensure that it went out with the best quality? Well, here is where we generally hear some of the questions, or when we get into some conversation with some of our customers. Oh, the installation happened, but maybe after a week or so, I started seeing tickets telling, hey, I'm trying to do this in application and I see it is crashing, or it throws some errors which I don't know what to do about, right? So these are some of the runtime errors or situations that you may not generally test, or you don't have the knowledge about when you make a deployment. So while it is important that, hey, you're good with the deployment and all of that, but these kind of things will add more support cases, which also increases your effort, or you start spending time on troubleshooting those packages rather than spending time on addressing the new software requests or addressing some other more important tasks. So how do we address this problem, or how do you upfront get to know, could there be any runtime issues with this package when it got deployed, right? So we know Bob mentioned about Admin Studio. Now Admin Studio has got really a bunch of tests, rules, or what we call them, which can actually get into the package and give you the information that you would have not imagined, and you'd have no clue that, hey, this could be a potential problem with the runtime when it gets installed. So I thought maybe I could look at some examples which could be really valuable for this discussion and help you understand how you can upfront, even before the deployment, can identify if there could be potential function problems, and also in some cases how Admin Studio can fix those issues automatically. Like, for example, now here is an example where we talk about standard user changes. We call the test as standard user changes, but let's understand with this whole security issue. Now we really need to understand the importance of UAC, or the prompt that makes sure the user who is on the machine, who is the logged on user, has enough privileges to run that application. Now there are cases where your application, it actually requires the elevated privileges to perform certain functionality, but it is a very common scenario that when you're on a laptop or on your device, you are logged in as a standard user without the elevations. So in those cases, what happens is the functionality or the action which requires elevation will fail silently and you'll have no clue about it. So your user just saw an really undesired behavior of that application, and he's wondering, everything looks fine, but I'm not able to perform this action, or my application is not able to perform this action, right? So here, what Administrator does, it goes and really identifies all those exe files within the package which need UAC, and it adds a manifest file which will direct the operating system to launch a UAC prompt. Now, if your user has admin privileges, he'll be able to provide the credentials, or it fails. So at least now you know that it was not intended for that user, and you'll be good. Many such examples. Now, another example where we will see the functionality of the application being hit is when, well, this is not a good practice. They should have been taken care by the author of the installer itself. It's not a good practice that's mixing the per user and per machine content in a single component. Now, imagine you are in a multi-user environment. Now you are making the deployment. Now you have a component in your package which has got a mix of per user and per machine. Now the installation happens all fine, but it will be partial because only the user who is logged in now will get the part of the functionality and the other will be lost. So that will again result in runtime issues or undesired behavior from that application. I've got a couple of more examples. These are the examples that.
Before you go on, Karen, I think that those are both really good examples of problems that you might run into that you might not even hear about, right? Because users they get prompted or things don't work as expected. So again, doesn't get you past functional testing, and you need to make sure that you're not testing with elevated credentials as an admin, or you're going to miss things like that. But what you mentioned initially about, there's a problem that you might not see come up for weeks. That's a real problem that I know a lot of people on the call experience, where you don't have somebody that understands that application from, and all its functionality and everything it should do. And if the person testing it isn't very familiar with the application, they're going to do one or two things, and those one or two things might work fine, and then later you find yourself burned. I think we skip a slide, and I don't know if you had something to add, Mike, in terms of the discussion today before we got into more details.
I was just going to, yeah. Okay. I was going to add to that last point, Bob, is right. It's a balance. It's a balance for IT folks to let's get these applications out the door so our end users can start using them and do their job. But you also want to avoid a lot of post-deployment, help desk tickets and everything coming out. And most IT organizations without a tool like an Admin Studio or something that helps you with this testing up front, you're kind of left with, all I can do really is throw it on a test machine, test install it, double click the main shortcut, didn't get any errors. I think it's good, but I'm not an expert at this app. It's some complicated financial, scientific, engineering, whatever application. I don't use it. I don't have a back-end, credentials to use the rest of it or whatever it may be. So there's only so much I can do as an IT person to vet it. And so the idea here is just by taking the package and before you deployed it, looking at it and looking at its contents, we can glean enough information to start letting you know and giving us these upfront problems. And how we classify it, we're using Admin Studio, of course, because that's our solution and our screenshots here. There's other ways to go about this testing, but at least at Admin Studio, we classify them between errors and warnings. And I've always said the errors are more the showstoppers. Those are, if I don't address those type of things, it's likely not going to install or the application won't run correctly, right? I'm going to have reduced functionality. I'm going to have more of those error messages if I don't fix the errors. So warnings are more things that it could cause problems. And to Kieran's earlier point, right, it may not cause a problem early on, right? You might not find it in functional testing, Might not find it in the first week or two of after its deployment, but eventually it may crop up as a potential problem. So we just want to let you know about that information up front. And you could decide whether that's something you want to address. It may not be. It may be something it's okay. In fact, we have on all these screenshots, you'll see a little on switch. If you flip it to off in Admin Studio, we basically say, you know what, for this particular issue, for this particular application, I don't care about it. I'm not interested in it. So I can, it's, you know, I'm either experienced with this app or I've seen this before and it's not a problem. I'm okay with it, right? We've deployed this app before and it doesn't have on Windows 11, and it doesn't have this launch condition issue. It's not designed in a way that it should be to be aware of it, but it doesn't seem to cause any problems. So I'm okay with turning that particular error for that app off. So we understand that not everything requires immediate, oh my God, I got to fix it right now type of thing, but we want to give you that information so you can make smarter decisions on that.
And that's where the experience of the packager really comes into play, because someone who doesn't know better might try to fix everything and go down a rabbit hole unnecessarily. But our tool is designed to give those experienced packagers the ability to suppress what they know doesn't matter and focus on the things that do. We refer to it as testing, and I think that is sometimes confusing to people because they think testing is functional testing and launching it and making sure it works. But there's a different class of tests that we're using before you've installed the application, just looking at the package. We can obviously get into an MSI package and examine its contents. You can do so, manually with the tool, and if you're, really experienced, know what to look for and find some potential showstoppers and problems that you might want to address. For EXE packages, that's a bit more of a black box, right? But in many cases, they're essentially self-extracting executables, and you can get to the files inside. So most executables, Admin Studio is actually able to break the contents of that package apart and look at the files and make some of these determinations as well. Obviously, automatically fixing something becomes a very different story, because if you're in MSI and there's a problem, we might have an automated fix to correct the problem by making a change that you would otherwise manually. But when it's an executable package, some of these errors that look like showstoppers really tell you, okay, test the heck out of this one, get a subject matter expert. It's a potential problem child that needs more attention versus something that you can fix. You may have to go to the vendor, find a newer version, an alternative program. It depends on the problem in question. But I think that sets it up well. Karen, if you want to take us back, I didn't realize these slides were built, so I'm just going to build it out. Some more of the automatically fixable things that we identify?
Right. There are many others, but these I just took as an example so we could have this conversation and help understand how important it is to identify these issues. Another challenge that I generally see is these kind of issues, what we are seeing right now, which are related to runtime or functionality. It's really difficult or it becomes challenging and very time-consuming task for you to figure out what went wrong. Why is that when you click on this part of the application, it's crashing? You'd not know that, without even getting to know these details inside of a package. So you may run the tests in Admin Studio first, and then you might choose to fix them later. But that is the kind of details that you'd otherwise would have spent a really lot of time figuring out or trying to troubleshoot after a help desk ticket is reported. Now, other than the two that we discussed, some of the commonly known ones that you might hear is on the reboot pending. Now, it's considered a good practice. You don't want to install when your machine is in a state where there is a reboot pending, because either there is a file that is pending to be renamed or anything. So now let's say you have package and this condition can be added as a launch condition. You could check if the machine is in a reboot state, and then you could decide, do you want to continue or not? Now, it's generally a good practice not to install when reboot is pending. So let's say your package doesn't have such a condition, then we could, Admin Studio could let you know about a condition, and you could also, as auto fix, right? Click on a button and it will add the condition to the package. And the same goes with force reboot action as well. Now you could, once again, it's not a good user experience. You're in the middle of the installation and your machine restarts. You don't want user to go through that. He's in the middle of some important work. It's a downtime, right? You want to avoid that. So these are certain actions that Admin Studio can check in your package and say, hey, you know what, let's avoid this. And you could just, again, click off a button and it can suppress such actions. Now, this could be a rare case of Windows help files. This is generally a case where your application is really, really old. You're stuck with old application and the help document of the application is still in that old format, which has the extension .hlp, right? All those help files or that format of help files have been dropped by Admin Studio by Microsoft. So if you have such files in your application, then you'll not be able to launch those help files. So Admin Studio can identify those and add a supporting utility which can open those files. So these are some of the issues that we identify and also provide automatic fix. The fix could be generally, we generate a transform file and all the fixes will go in the transform file. Once again, this is to make sure that your MSI that is inside Admin Studio is not tampered. We don't want to make any changes to the MSI that's in Admin Studio. So the best way to do it is we add all those automatic fixes in a transform file, and you could use this transform file while you're deploying your MSI package with the switch, transforms equals and pause the file. So
the reboot pending and reboot action make me, we've all dealt with these problems, but the whole need for the reboot that we run into is because a previous installation, had to rename something that was in use or update something that was in use, and it can't do it. So you have to reboot it to release the file. This is one of the things that we're all looking forward to from MSIX, where, and really, I know MSIX is of interest to a lot of people, so I want to layer it in to this conversation. The reboot and replacing files in use is not an issue with MSIX. Even though it isn't a virtual package, even if you were updating a file in the virtual package, it doesn't actually replace the file. If it's in use, it will dynamically lay it side by side, and the next time it's available, the new file will get referenced. So this is, this will be looked at as a legacy problem that the next generation of packagers don't have to worry about. But we know the MSIX packages are far and few between right now, but it's one of the things we have to look forward to.
That's another good example.
That's a good point on MSIX.
Mm-hmm.
Good, Mike.
Oh, I was going to just point, I always like an MSIX to Windows what we're already used to with our mobile devices, right? Android, iOS. You download an app, you don't have to reboot your phone. I mean, you could, but it doesn't require it to that level, and that's what, to Bob's point, with MSIX, yet another advantage of what it could bring to Windows is it's just there. It sets up, it's a container, doesn't change the overall file system outside of it. So less types of issues like reboot problems.
The user experience everybody's come to expect from their devices.
Right. It's like, I can do that on these other devices. Why do I have to do this on Windows? So, yeah. I was going to say the HLP, that's a good example of there's different ways to address it, right? Because it isn't a catastrophic problem. It's a warning as we've labeled it here. It doesn't, right? If this was the only problem for this particular application, the worst comes to worst is you go to help and, help contents, and it's not going to load properly, right? It doesn't prevent the application itself operating. So you may be okay with that. It was like back in the day with AppV packages. I remember it was, well, the only problem is this unsigned driver, or this driver won't install correctly, but it's for printing, and you kind of go through some of your users that use that particular application, nobody prints from it anymore, right? So that could be something that's like, well, we're okay with that particular problem because it's not a feature capability that people are really using. So we're okay to get around it. In this case, to Kieran's point, there's a little wrench or spanner icon there, so we can address it. We have an automated way to do it, but it's up to you on how you want to approach those issues.
Right.
One thing before we continue,
point.
I was going to. Oh, I'm sorry, Kieran. Before you continue, I was just going to say on all these, there's a question in the chat about, do we have to have a catalog for all this type of testing? So yeah, all the testing you see in these, in the past and the future screenshots, you can take advantage of this if you have Admin Studio today, but you do need an application catalog, which is a SQL database setup. And the reason for that is, all the testing information around the application, the results, we need to store that somewhere, and just doing it in a flat file system doesn't work well. So having a SQL database allows us to get the right content, right information about a package, so we can easily, quickly scan it, show you these results that you're seeing here, and then figure out the best way to resolve those issues too. So it needs a catalog for all that. All good.
I was trying to add your point on the MSIX. Now, if you look at the MSIX package itself, and we generally get into a discussion of what are the advantages of MSIX over MSI, right? So some of the tests that we are discussing may not be applicable to MSIX. The reason is one big functionality of MSIX is it gets installed in a user context. So there is no machine context. So straight away, your problems of UAC and all of that will be automatically dealt by the package and the platform itself. So, this could be a very good advantage for somebody who is trying to move to MSIX or either have a plan to move to MSIX in let's say 3 or 6 months.
Yeah, it'll be more forgiving, right? Like people can be sloppy packagers. you could have your package contain temp files and things that are from a service that was running that you shouldn't have captured, and it should not, in most cases, cause you all the heartache you would have with a normal deployment and uninstallation, right? Because that's where things really get ugly. You install something that doesn't belong in your application but belongs to some other application. It installs, everything's fine, but when you remove it, you've now taken something away from another application, and you've encountering new problems. So uninstalls a big benefit of MSIX that's highlighted quite a bit, but there's a real world scenario why it matters, not just from Windows rot leaving crap behind, but the damage that an uninstall could potentially do.
And there is a whole new set of conflicts testing, just in case you want to make sure your application doesn't break the others that are already deployed, right? So that kind of conflict is also sometimes common when somebody wants to make a deployment, though it has reduced a lot these days, but that was once upon a time a big testing effort to make sure that the application you're trying to deploy doesn't break others. So when you're in MSIX, because of the containerization feature where the application operates within the container, the question of conflicts would never occur. So you can very confidently deploy MSIX packages without even worrying about, is it going to break any other package or previous version or anything like that.
Yeah, good stuff. So those are ones that we've identified as things that we can automatically fix and have offered some solutions to. And as Karen said, that's just an example of some for purposes of conversation here. I see here, Karen, you've got some that we can identify and highlight, but not necessarily automatically fix for various reasons.
Yeah, that's correct. Now, if you look at actually the test like the ones we are seeing here, right? So we don't, or the IT pro or the package engineer who is working on a package doesn't really have a control on fixing this. Because these have to be fixed by the vendor. Now, again, we started with Log4j and the security thing. Now let's take it to the next step. Now you have got some executables in your package which are not signed by the vendor. Well, it's not trusted executable. once again, it's a best practice. Every software vendor should digitally sign all the executables that are inside the package. So that is where your customers will trust the package. Now, your customers should also be confident that nothing has been injected or tampered during the transit of the package, either through a website or download or anything, right? So now, when somebody says unsigned executable in a package, now I might not be very comfortable using it, right? But can we fix it? No, because we don't know what the digital signing is. We don't know who the vendor is. So the best thing in this case is you'll have to maybe go back to your vendor and say, hey, I found this one. I just want to make sure either you get a confirmation and that, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about it. It is ours. Or you'd rather say, okay, then can you please sign it and package it back and send it to us? So these are some tests that will give you this kind of information, which will be beyond the control of package engineer or the IT pro who works on these packages. So another example is the whole Windows installer itself is unsigned, which is, again, not a good practice. You want the Windows installer to be signed. And now if you have Windows Defender now on your machine, it would not allow you to install this because it's not signed by a trusted publisher. Now, when your Windows installer is signed by a trusted certificate, then the Defender will automatically accept it and the installation will go through, or else it will block you right there.
I was going to say also, for those organizations we talk to a lot that have internally developed applications and they get their packages from development teams. So this is something that they could go back to their team and ask for that. I also know some organizations, a lot more have, even though signing an MSI was a best practice, a lot of internal apps weren't necessarily signed because it was an extra step and they didn't have a certificate on which to do it. But a lot of these security tools, like Kieran mentioned, Defender and others, that that's kind of the first thing. If an installation isn't digitally signed, then I don't want to even attempt to trust this, so I just block it. And so if you've got internally built apps that and you've got that security model in place, then that could be a problem. So having that nice check, and you could use best would be going to a certificate authority like a VeriSign or an Entrust or something like that and getting a cert. You could always generate your own self-signed cert, and then you have to push that out into the certificate store throughout your organization. So that can be some additional effort. But one way or another, having everything digitally signed, even if it's internally developed, we can check this here, you can digitally sign it, and then be that much better on the security front.
Which taking us back to the MSI topic is now mandatory. MSIs have to be signed and trusted in order to run it all.
Yeah, MSIX, that's not even a question, is you don't get the option, right? It's required. So, and for good reason.
It doesn't even allow you to continue. Maybe in this case, you might still, push the Windows installer to continue with the installation, though it identifies this package. But in case of MSIX, it outright fails the installation. It doesn't even proceed. I like that about MSIX.
Yeah. But that's, and while we wait for vendors to start deploying their MSIX packages for those organizations that want to start doing it themselves and deploying it out, that is a requirement, right? You have to figure out, how do we digitally sign this application, and how do we use that with a certificate that is trusted by our machines, right? Because, if you do a self-sign, you could do that, but you then need to just populate that out with all your machines. Otherwise, it's going to say, I don't trust this, I don't trust my own company as a certificate authority, and won't let it run. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind, but hopefully as vendors start releasing more MSIX packages, we're starting to see a few like Firefox, at most, right? Most organizations at this point would be creating their modification packages to go alongside, but not modifying those directly. So.
Right. On the point of self-signed certificates, well, it's not a good practice at all for you to use self-signed certificates to make your production deployments. It's okay if you're in the testing phase. Maybe you want to test your first deployment ring maybe on 5 machines or 10 machines just to make sure the installation is going fine, the deployments are all successful, and or while building some sample MSX for your learning. So self-signed certificate is good enough for that, but not for production deployments, not at all.
Yeah, and probably still not a great idea, right? Like part of the package and the deployment is going to be that signature being in place properly and trusted by the endpoint. So, another reason to, trying to work around the new requirements and make things as easy as they used to be could bite you. So, just get on board. Yeah.
There's a bigger upfront cost for that trusted certificate from a trusted certificate authority, but the distribution of it, the trust has already been established, right, throughout your organization. So I guarantee you probably all your Windows machines trusts, a recent cert from VeriSign, right, for example, or Entrust. So you just sign it, and then you don't have to worry about the extra distribution part of it. And that's just the better way to do it.
So real quick on the API calls before we move on here, we've got a lot to get through.
Right. So that's a lot deeper into the package. Now, as a package engineer, or even maybe a developer would sometimes not know, what APIs or what Windows APIs are being called by an application. Somebody would have developed some time ago, and he might have not be aware of all those APIs that are being used in this application. So Administrator does a really good job. It can go and look at what APIs are being used, and not only that, it will let you know if those APIs are obsolete. If those are obsolete, which would mean that those are not functional in the new version of the Windows operating system, and that would result in some loss in the functionality. Now, once again, the only way to get around this is you have to go back to your vendor and check if the new version of the package, they've got a replacement of this API, if there's a new API replaced by Windows and all of that. So once again, this is not a kind of issue that could be fixed by a package engineer. There are a couple of more, once again, at this level where the engineer or admin studio doesn't really have control. Dependency on .NET Framework 1.0, that's like really, really old. So at this point, we can identify if your application has got any references or any dependency on .NET Framework, but we are going to add new versions, which we'll talk about in a bit from now. But this is one test that we already have, and this will let you know if your application is really dependent on an older one. I don't imagine this to be a very common scenario. This could be, once again, like some of those really old applications that have been there, and there is no way you can get to the new version, and you're stuck with those, right? So these are some rare applications.
It's usually an application from a vendor that's gone out of business or no longer supports it, yet for one reason or another, the organization in question can't, that are dealing with packaging it can't quite get off of it. But here's again another reason, right? It's trying to, there's no way to upgrade an application that relies on .NET 1 and 1.1, right? If it really does, it really needs to be one way or another sunsetted and replaced with something else. So this is a good example of letting you know, right? I think Windows, after 7 or so, I think it's 7 that they dropped support for this. So starting with 7. So to your point, Kieran, people have at least moved on starting with 7 and beyond. So they're probably not running into these very often, but you might have something running in an XP VM and trying to look at, do we sunset it? It's getting longer and longer in the tooth, so we need to get rid of it. But it's not a way to just fix it, because it's hard. It's how it was developed, the application itself. Same thing with hard-coded paths. So you could, try to do some redirection tricks, but it's just something really needs to go back to whoever developed it, whether it's an internal app or a commercial vendor, and say, we need this updated because this isn't something that's
right. And often it is an internally developed application, and it was contracted, and that contract's over, or the person who created it is gone, and you're stuck with this old application because it's mission critical to your business. And you may have limited control over the establishment of a new contract, or building a new version or a web version or whatever the next thing is. but you could provide these kinds of insights to help bolster the use or the business case for making that investment.
Yep.
The next thing we were going to talk about is detecting Java and Log4j. I kind of mentioned this in the opening, and probably it's easy to understand the benefit. But I think the Java one in particular is really cool because you do have to update Java a lot, and it's good to know what applications could be impacted by that so you can focus your testing. But not only do we tell you if there's a dependency on Java, but what version, if that version's end of life. And as many of you know, often Java is bundled into the application with that deployment just for that app, because you can have, unfortunately, you can have 10 different versions of Java running on your system and have them all things that you're trying to patch and get a hold of. But so you can see, is it included? Is it a dependency? And is the version end of life? So you can be aware of what to do about it. Once again, not something that you're going to click a button and fix, but definitely something that you want to be aware of for testing purposes, or looking for upgrades and making sure you keep things up to date. And then Log4j was just the latest example of, hey, it sure would be good to know what's in my packages, because Log4j in particular was a pain because you couldn't just check your inventory and see where's Log4j installed, because in many cases it's deployed as a component, kind of like Java, where it's in a package, and so it's not going to show up as a installed application in add remove programs or your inventory necessarily. It's going to be part of an application, and for you to know what applications that it's included in allows you to know, okay, where's this installed? Let me get to the vendor and make sure I get the latest version and so forth. So just another really good use case for examining package contents and being able to get value just from awareness.
And I would add to that, right, is most of the solutions that are out there, we have some from Flexera, and there's other solutions to help you detect, right, what's already deployed. And obviously that's really important because that's where you want to go after. But I'd say this is probably one of the few areas where we're looking at pre-deployment or, on the packaging side to know. So if you get a new request for an app and you could run it against this just to make sure you're not introducing something new that could have an older version of Log4j that hasn't been updated yet. And it could be a component within a component within a component within a component, for that Java application. But knowing that up front, you're going to, okay, well, let's pause for this. Let's not push it out and add something new that then I have to fix later. So it's approaching it from a different angle. And it's nice to have that coverage there.
And then you've got a couple of examples here, Karen, that show the difference in how it looks.
Yeah, it's important, right? You really want to know if your application is just dependent or is it also going to install the Java. So those, you might want to deal with them differently for your applications which require Java. Maybe you want to, it might be a bigger, it might be a smaller problem compared to the ones that the application installs. So this rules in Admin Studio give you a good understanding of, is it just the dependency or does it also install? And we also go one step further, letting you know the versions and if those versions are already end of life. Again, a big security concern. If you see there is an application which is either dependent on or either installing any Java version which has end of life, then you'd rather not want to do that and look if there is a new version made available by your vendor, and that would be the right replacement rather than going ahead with such packages.
Yeah, there you go. Clean up your whole environment of all the end of life and vulnerable versions of Java, and then tomorrow you deploy another application that undoes that progress. So
oh yeah,
really good just from an awareness perspective. Another thing when we were looking at what we do to look at packages and help with contents and fixing issues, the subject of dependency scanning came up because a lot of times you have an application that depends on another. Like Java, for example, isn't necessarily included. It's expected to be there, and so you want your deployment process to be aware of that. And Mike, you pulled this screen where we're looking at the package and identifying things that should be included, and then this gets passed to configuration manager. You want to elaborate on this a little bit?
Yeah, so in Admin Studio, there's a section, right? So if I'm going to deploy to a distribution system like Config Manager, aka SCCM, I want to be able to set that up, right? Instead of having, it used to be, right, you had to put all that in the package. Now you can take that out and extract it out and give it to Config Manager. That way it can look for you and look to see what dependencies it may require. And if a particular endpoint doesn't have that, let's install that first, right, before the main installer so everything goes smoothly. So in Admin Studio, there's a way to say, well, it's already in SCCM, it's already in Config Manager, so you can set that link there. It's something that's locally here in my application catalog database, so I want to link the two together. Or in cases like an MSI, since it's an open format that we can scan a bit better, we can get to the level of looking for dependencies directly. So this is actually I think it's a headset for my headset, and it had because it can interface with different unified communication solutions like Zoom. So there's an option to, hey, it has a integration with Zoom. It's not a requirement, but in this case, so you could optionally add it, but you want to kind of understand any dependencies it does have and configure that here just so that, the resulting deployment system knows that and can make that deployment seamless and work the first time versus, I tested on a test machine that had the dependency and it ran just fine. Now I deployed it out to 500 end users and only 200 of them had the right dependency. So now the other 300, it doesn't work, that type of stuff. It's just yet another, is my environment ready for this app, right? And one of the things I want to be ready for is dependency of other applications. And so you can configure that. We could do a scan in Admin Studio. We can configure that here, and then that's the way it's saved. When we do that publish up to Config Manager, this information goes along with everything else. So it's set up, it's ready to go, and it can do that check for you. And if you already have it, then you're good, right? We don't need to redeploy it. But if it doesn't already have it for an end user, they got a new machine or something like that, and it doesn't yet have that, let's deploy it. So then this application in question will work properly.
I think there's a great example of deployment quality, the way we started in the beginning. So there was package quality. We discussed about all the kind of rules and everything that you want to look at. And then we also looked at deployment quality. I think this is a great example where you can really achieve a very good deployment quality just by making sure that all the dependencies that are required for this application are either already deployed or you want to deploy it along with that application. Great example.
Right.
Yeah, and your environment, in this case, should Zoom be a dependency or nice to have? It depends on the environment, and once again goes back to the experience and knowledge of the packager to understand the environment and make sure it's set up for success and not reactively addressed. Some other things that we're looking. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say that it just reminds me of if you're the developer developing an application, you know your app really well, but you don't know what all the different environments of your end customers look like. As an IT person, I know what my environment typically looks like, but I never developed this app, so I don't know this. So there's that kind of gap of knowledge that if you had both, then you'd know exactly what the app needs and what your environment looks like and doesn't need it. So that's what in Admin Studio I'm not an expert in the 500 applications I manage and deploy out to my environment. So let's give you that analysis and upfront knowledge so you can make the better package quality and dependency or deployment quality checks that you need.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because if you're a developer putting a package together, it has to maybe account for a huge number of variables where you know which matter and which don't. Yeah. So looking at the package, we're always looking ahead and we're always soliciting feedback. We've got ideas in our community section. Love to hear any thoughts there, but also here in the Q&A, we have for a while been considering adding, not just the dependency check, but the actual package analysis like we're now doing for Log4j and Java to say, is there a .NET framework or a C++ runtime dependency? Maybe you just want to be aware of it, or maybe you want to do a version check, or what the case may be. And then we're also considering the value in, Log4j is a very specific thing, and the solution that we put in place was very targeted at that because we were, being agile and getting a feature out very, very quickly. But longer term, we're thinking, it was Log4j now, but who knows what vulnerable component or thing that you're going to be interested in looking at tomorrow. So more dynamically, just getting a bill of materials from all of the packages that are in your catalog so that you could run a simple report that says which contain this component. And that listed components might be dynamic based on what's been detected in your environment. So it's very tailored. And then you could say, where does this exist? And get a report back for not only where it exists, but the version of it that exists. So I think that's going to be a future very compelling feature that could save us from a problem we're not even aware of, what's around the corner from the security perspective. But we, value customer feedback very strongly. And so we'd like to, talk to customers as we do when we're doing a roadmap or just having a technology conversation to get their thoughts on things. But the community is another place where we can do that in mass and maybe have a conversation between, multiple interested parties about what's important, how to go about it. There's a lot of value in that kind of dialogue. So we solicit that feedback. And at this point, we've still got about 10 minutes left. And so we'd like to go to some questions. I don't know if Mike or Kieran have seen one they want to jump on, or if Sonny's got one queued up for us.
Well, yeah, before we get into the question and answer, now, we did discuss about some tests and all, but if you look at it, testing might really become like endless because there could be types of testing. There could be, you have an MSI and you want to test if it's a good candidate for MSIX or not. Can you convert it to MSIX or not? Or there are a bunch of best practices that you want to make sure your package complies by. A good installation author or a good developer would have taken care of having all the best practices added into the package, right? So that could be one kind of testing. And there are this ICE tests recommended by Microsoft. So there are a whole bunch of tests that you can actually perform on a package. So that is where I think it's a good balance that you'll have to really look at your environment. You'll have to look at what works in your case and then take a well-informed decision as to which rules or which kind of testing fits your needs, your requirements, and then go with that, or else testing would really become endless and some of them may not be even required.
Yeah, you don't want testing overload, right? That's why in our in our analysis section, there's in Admin Studio, there's a select test to execute, and you could have everything on. And the nice thing with Admin Studio is whatever you have on and you select an app and you run the test, it'll run it against the whole thing. So you don't have to do MSIX compatibility or suitability testing versus OS compatibility versus Java dependency versus like this Log4j that we added, risk analysis. You can run it all in one go and get all those different aspects. They're all different types of potential challenges that you want to be aware of, but you can get it all in one run through using Admin Studio. But at the same point, like Kieran said, you don't necessarily want 100% of all the rules enabled, right? So within all the sections, we have every single test you can click on. We can give you some more information about why we've included it as a potential test. For like I've been around for a while, so I've been helping people like from go to Windows 7 and then Windows 10 and now 11. And we have a lot of tests, but we even don't necessarily recommend running all of them because there's some tests that are just like, it doesn't meet the best practices. It doesn't meet the intended, Windows installer, methodology. But does it cause a problem? Not really. You run the classic thing is you take a vendor application that installs and works just fine, and you run it against all the tests, and you're going to get warnings, right? Because no vendor validates their application, even if they use an MSI for all the recommended Windows installer, consistency evaluating rules. So, it's a balance of knowing what rules are relevant. What insights do you want to know? We give you some information about why we test for it, why you may want to look at it. But if you're not finding apps that have old HLP file system, then it's probably something safe to ignore potentially, right? Maybe leave it on at first, and over time you can adapt and change the testing rules to fit your needs.
It looks like we have answered all the questions either live or through the chat. But I have had customers reach out to me, and I know that we've posted something in the Admin Studio community. If Admin Studio itself was affected by Log4j, if you can address that.
Yeah. Well, I know we did an analysis. We actually did it through all of our Flexera solutions. So there's a master page. We can share the link out, but that goes through all the Flexera solutions. And then we have a division called Revenera. So if you know Install Shield and some of our FlexNet products, they have their own page. They have their own community, and thus they have their own page that describes their solution. So you don't see everything under Flexera. I think we cross-link over to the Revenera one. But for this discussion, when it comes to Admin Studio, it's under Flexera. And we did do an analysis, and Kieran, right, we turned up, we're good. There's none of the currently supported released versions of Admin Studio. That's what we went through, which is like back 5 or so releases. We don't have anything that's affect Log4j. Yeah. So
yeah, no components of Log4j within Admin Studio.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense. There's no Java components. There's no Java components.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So thankfully, we didn't stake our claim on Java and develop Admin Studio using Java. So as a result, not a Log4j heavy thing. But yeah, so we're good. But I think initially we thought maybe it did, but there was a component that we thought might have been included that did affect it, but we updated our assessment, and no currently supported versions, including the latest release, are affected by Log4j for Admin Studio.
There is a small, I understand that confusion because there's a small functionality of install shield, which is dependent on the product on our Revenera side called CodeAware. And there was some integration between install shield and CodeAware. Now, since install shield is also being shipped with Admin Studio, there was a confusion that, hey, since there is CodeAware that is being shipped with install shield, and I see install shield in Admin Studio, do you have any Java components around Log4j? Once again, just to make clear that the Install Shield version of Admin Studio is a little different from the actual standalone Install Shield product. And this particular integration or this particular version of Install Shield that goes inside Admin Studio doesn't have CodeAware inbuilt as an installation. The functionality is there, but it doesn't install CodeAware. So that way we can safely say there is not even a single component of Log4j, let alone the vulnerable one in Admin Studio's installation.
Yeah. We did get a question in, more of a general purpose packaging discussion, but it says, can you recommend good reference for using the repackager? So there's the repackager, which is the component that's included with Admin Studio that you use for capturing installations. It was typically, you get an exe from a vendor. There's not really much you can do to customize it these days, although more and more organizations do like to wrap those type of applications, right? So maybe the vendor install works just fine, but you want to do something before or after the installer to add additional config files or registry keys or other information. So not only does the app get installed in general, but it's specifically configured for your users. So a lot of people have turned to PowerShell wrapping. But the question is installer has 3 different EXEs that you only see in the temp directory. I assume those EXEs are then being used to then launch it. So if I understand the question correctly, it sounds like it's an EXE that unpacks several other EXE installers into a temp location, then executes those, and those EXEs don't stay around forever. If that's indeed the case, there's a couple different ways you can use the repackager. There's what we call installation monitoring. That's the preferred approach, where it looks at the executable you've given it, and it watches what it does specifically to the machine and ignores all the other services and things running in the background. It's a lot faster because we're not capturing everything that changes. But in some cases, maybe perhaps like that might be a case where you want to do what we call the snapshot approach, where you take a whole system-wide snapshot of the environment before you do anything, then you do something to it, and then you take another whole snapshot and you compare the difference between the two, and that's considered the package. So that might be a use case for the snapshot version or a snapshot approach in the repackager. But if you have additional questions, feel free to post on community, and we'll point you to the right information. I don't know if anything Kieran or Bob you want to add there.
No, I think that was perfect. Snapshot method should be the one that you should be going with for this kind of scenario.
Yeah, I think so. Cool.
And we're right on time here too, so very good. We've got our next session scheduled for March 8th. We haven't chosen a topic to bring to the table, so that's another thing we'd be happy to collect feedback on if anybody would care to suggest something. But thank you very much for coming. We always appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you again next time.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.